Hi, it's Hope and welcome to the video. This is going to be my September wrap-up. This will be longer than my typical September end of the month wrap-up and stats because I didn't do a mid-month one because I had a family problem that I wasn't quite over with by the time I had to film, so I didn't film. But let's just get into the stats, which I read 14 books across 6,252 pages. The average star rating was a 4.5. I read 1 contemporary, 11 fantasy, 1 horror, and 1 romance, but the romance is borderline contemporary. You'll see which one I'm talking about. And I read 2 new adults and 12 YA, but one of those new adults, technically I don't know what it's classed as, but I'd say new adult. Again, you'll see what one I'm talking about once I get to it, but let's just get into the books. And this is going to be a long video, so I will try to do these as quick as possible. So the first book that I read in September was Queen of Volts by Amanda Foody, and this is the third and final book in the Shadow Game series, and this I gave a 5-star. The Shadow Game series follows a girl named N who has to travel to the city of New Rains to find her mother, and she ends up meeting this gang lord named Leigh, and Leigh helps N try to find her mother, but they end up getting wrapped up in this game called the Shadow Game that puts their life at risk. And so since Queen of Volts is the third in the series, they end up in this new game that puts their lives and their friends' lives in jeopardy and all of that. I absolutely loved this book. It was the perfect conclusion to this series. I absolutely love this series as well. I would shove this series down anyone's throats that is willing to read it. It is so good. It has so much representation. And yeah, I'm gonna not talk about that anymore because this is gonna be a long video. Next we have City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra Clare, and this is the 6th and final book in the Mortal Instruments series. If you do not know what the Mortal Instruments series is about, we follow a girl named Clare Frey who discovers that she is a part of the Shadow World, and the Shadow World is filled with shadow hunters, which are humans with angel blood. We have vampires, werewolves, fair folk, warlocks, and all of that. And this final book, I can't really say much since it's the 6th book in the series, but I absolutely love this. I gave this a 5-star. This book contains, honestly, maybe my all-time favorite fictional villain. Maybe, yeah, probably our main villain is one of my favorite villains in literacy. I love every single book that I've read from Cassandra Clare, to the point that I'm trying to read 3 books by Cassandra Clare in October here. So yeah, City of Heavenly Fire. Next we have Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin, and this I gave 5 stars. Blood and Honey is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, and Serpent and Dove follows a witch named Lou and a witch hunter named Reed, who for reasons have to be a part of this arranged marriage. And Blood and Honey starts off where they are on the run with some of their friends for reasons that I can't say, and all of that. And I didn't like this one as much as the first, but I liked it, and I just randomly thought of the ending, and I'm like, do not cry. It has a very sad ending, and I am really excited to see where this series goes in the 3rd book, which I think is going to be released next year, I think. But it's a really good book. It wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but it was still amazing in many different ways. Therefore, it got a 5-star. Next we have The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra, Clare, and Wesley Chu. I totally forgot I read this month until I read the list. But this follows Shadowhunter named Alec and a warlock named Magnus as they have to travel to Shanghai after some old friends of theirs breaks into their apartment and steals the Lost Book of the White, which is a very powerful spell book. They have to leave their son and go on this trip with their friends and all of that. I gave this a 5-star, but it's like, I'm not sure if it's a 5-star or a 4.5 because I loved it to death, but I read it during a very difficult time. Therefore, I didn't process the information as well as I should have. So a lot of it is fuzzy, especially the last like 200 pages are very fuzzy because I read this around a point that I got some terrible news and I struggled to comprehend what I was reading, but I still had to read to distract myself from that. But I loved it. I love these characters so much, and all of that. Again, I love Cassandra Clare's writing, and I love that this, since it's a like 2-author book, that it doesn't feel, you can't tell it's 2 different authors, which I love that in books that are multiple authors, that they don't feel like different, there aren't parts of the book that feel different. Next we have After We Collided by Anna Todd, and this I gave a 4-star. This is the second book in the After series, and follow a girl named Tessa who goes to university, and she ends up meeting this bad boy named Hardin, and it's the story of their relationship and all of that. And every time I mention the series, I mention that I do not condone anything that really happens, any of the toxicity or anything like that. I do not condone it at all, but this is like my guilty pleasure series that I love, that I feel bad and guilty for loving. But I went ahead and reread this book. Yeah, this was a reread. This was a reread because of the movie that well, it came out in Canada and a lot of places in Europe in September. Here I was able to watch it on September 19th and I fucking loved it. But I love this book even though I shouldn't, but I just do. Next we have Of Ash and Shadow by Sarah King, and this I gave it 3.5. Of Ash and Shadow follows a girl named Wynne who she spent a year and a day in the fairy worlds, and it's been, I think it's been 2 or 3 years since that, and she gets dragged back into fairy to do a task that she has to do, and she ends up being joined by Clare, I think that's how you pronounce him, Clare, who is a part of the Wild Hunt, and it is Wynne and Clare trying to do this task and all of that. That is a very, very bad thing, like a bad description, but I didn't like this as much as I wanted to. I really thought I was going to like it because it has Fae, and when in doubt, give me a book with Fae. But it was okay. I feel like I'd have to reread it to understand a lot of the things, and I believe that the relationship between the 2 characters felt very rushed, and this book almost felt like it could have been a standalone, but it is going to be part of a greater series. This just came out in September, so I don't know when the next book in the series is going to come out. I probably will pick it up when it comes out just because I did like this, and I will probably reread it to see if my opinion changes after rereading this, because again, I read this around the time that my brain was elsewhere and I was dealing with other things, so yeah. Next we have Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, and this was a reread, and this is 5 stars. This is the sequel to Six of Crows, and in this book we follow our characters as after they went through this big like heist mission. They have to deal with the consequences of that they're not getting what they promised, and they're trying to get what they were promised, if that makes any sense. But this is one of my all-time favorite books. It's in my top 10 books. It's a reread. I loved rereading this so much. I love the characters. I love all the different representation. I love everything about this. If you have read this, you know what I'm about to talk about, but I cried like a baby at the end. I was sobbing, and I thought, okay, second time around, I'm not going to cry at this moment that I cried, and then I came around. I knew the chapter was happening, and I started crying at the beginning of the chapter, and I was crying for like 20 minutes. But if a book makes me cry, I automatically love it, so yeah. Next we have Spellslinger by Sebastien de Castell, and this I DNF'd. I DNF'd it after about 170 pages. I just couldn't get into it. I honestly couldn't explain to you what the hell was going on. I don't even remember the main character's name, but it felt like a chore to keep on reading it, and I could feel myself about to slip into a reading slump because, like, with of Ash and Shadow, I didn't really like it that much, and then Spellslinger I didn't really like, so I felt myself that I was like, if I finish Spellslinger, I'm going to slip into a reading slump, and so I DNF'd it. I might consider picking it up in the future, in like sometime next year maybe, because I have heard it's such a good series. It is one of Jade from JD Ray. It is one of Jade from JD Ray Reads. I think that's how you pronounce her channel, JD Ray Reads. Favorite books, like book series, and I trust her recommendations, so I thought I was gonna love it. I ended up DNFing it, and yeah. Sorry if the camera angle changed. I had to check to see if I had enough battery to continue with this. But next we have Autoboyography by Christina Lauren, and this I gave a 5 stars. This follows a boy named Tanner who lives in this Utah town that is very Mormon, and he is not. And this follows him going into his final semester of high school, and his best friend Autumn convinces him to join a writing class where you have to write a book in 4 months. And Tanner's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be easy. But when he finds out that there's going to be an assistant teacher who is someone who graduated the year before and won a book deal out of this class, Tanner starts to develop a crush on this assistant teacher whose name is Sebastien. And Sebastien is Mormon, so there leads the problem of that. And I really enjoyed this book. It was such a fun read. I was so happy the entire time, and I liked this book because it delved into the topic of your religion and sexuality, and how some religions do not accept some sexualities and trying to overcome that and all of that, as well as being bisexual, because Tanner is bisexual in a small community, which I relate to in some ways, because I live in not a small town, but you know somebody who knows someone who knows somebody who knows you, you either know somebody or you know somebody that person knows. things get around really quick, and I know that feeling of being closeted even though you don't want to be. But I love this. This was my first Christina Lauren book, and next we have Four Dead Queens by Astrid Scholte, and this follows a girl named Carolee, along with Carolee, who is a kind of thief and all of that, and when she steals this comm case that has these things that have information on it, she ends up finding out this information about how these 4 queens of the kingdom are going to be assassinated. They're going to be killed. And we see Carolee's point of view of trying to get that information to the queens with a boy named Varen. And then we also see the queens' point of views as and right before they are getting murdered. And there is one of the biggest plot twists I've ever read. I think it's like the second or third biggest plot twist that I've ever read, where it literally had me like audibly go, oh my lord, like I was so shocked. It threw me for a loop. I gave this 4 stars if I didn't already mention that. I can't remember if I did mention that. But I loved this, and for a standalone, it wrapped up so nicely. It felt like everything happened so quick, but yet it felt like everything didn't happen so quick. If you get what I mean? Like, it was just so good. Next we have Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, and this follows a wizard named Simon Snow who goes to this magical school called Watford, and it is his final year at Watford, and in this final year he enters school and he finds out that his roommate Baz is missing, and he tries to figure out where Baz is while trying not to be kidnapped or harmed by the evil Humdrum, which is like the villain of the story, and all of that, and I will leave it there. But this was a reread for me. I absolutely love this book and this series so far. Basically, the way I describe this every time is imagine Dreary, but make it real and all of that, because Simon and Baz have enemies to friends-ish to lovers, and it is very cool, and I just is that enough to describe how I feel? But I was so happy to reread this. Yeah. Next we have Drug by Lynda O'Rourke, and Drug I gave 4 stars. This follows a girl named Castell who decides to do this drug trial because she is low on cash and has a lot of debt that her father left her, and so she goes into this drug trial trying to get £2,000, $2,000 equivalent type thing. And this drug test is much more sinister and dangerous than she thinks. And I'll leave it there. It's a horror. This is like one of my favorite horror series ever. I just started the 2nd book and I'm like already back into it and obsessed. But yeah, there's not much more to say. This is one of the first series that I ever read, really. And it was so good to be rereading it. I've read Drug like, I think now it's 6 times, 5 or 6 times. And every single time, I love it every single time. It's amazing. Next we have A Shadow, Bright and Burning by Jessica Kules, and this follows a girl named Henrietta Howell, who is this first female sorcerer in, I think, centuries. And she ends up traveling to London from where she is to train with these like male sorcerers her age, and I don't really have much more to say about that without starting to do spoilers, but I gave this a 4-star, even though I'm kind of considering lowering it to 3.5, but I feel like 4 is the right option, because yes, I liked it, but a lot of it felt unnecessary or too long, and also it just, I liked it. I will definitely continue with the series, but there wasn't anything that like stood out to me except that there is like, you have sorcerers, magicians, and then witches. So you have multiple different kinds of magic in here, and it's a like historical, it takes place in like the, I think like the 1800s type era, I think. And yeah, I don't have much more to say. And then finally for this month, I've read Chainbreaker by Tara Sim, and this I gave a 4-star. And Chainbreaker is the second book in the Timekeeper trilogy, which Timekeeper follows a boy named Danny Hart, who is a clockwork mechanic, and we are in this alternate world type thing that time is controlled by clock towers. If a clock tower breaks, time stops. If a clock tower gets destroyed, time gets destroyed forever in that area. And Danny is a mechanic, and he has to go and fix clock towers, and that is kind of the very bad description of that. But Chainbreaker follows when towers fall in India and time is still working. Danny and a fellow mechanic named Daphne, who we meet in the first book, end up traveling to India to figure this out and all of that. It is a like historical fantasy series because it takes place in the late 1870s, I think, mid to late 1870s. But it's a steampunk setting, so there's things like planes and cars and telephones and all of that. This is also a queer series because Danny is gay and has a love interest, and all of that, and I really like this series so far. I'm going to be reading the final book in the series, Firestarter, in October. I'm so excited to continue with the series and finish it. And yeah. So those were the 14 books that I read this month, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye!